Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the wasmCloud community meeting for Wednesday, May the 1st. This should be a pretty fun community meeting today. We've got an awesome demo, and then we'll be doing some road mapping all in the call. So thank you all for being here. Thank you in advance for your feedback and questions and comments. But to start, why don't we go ahead and hand it over to Taylor, who someone, the host of this meeting, will need to give co-host permission to do a Wash plugins demo part two in the upcoming Wash release 0.28. So, Taylor, as you were.
Okay, here we go. Let me share the screen. That's the one I'm looking for. Sure. Make sure I have the chat up in case anyone wants to send questions and things. So I demoed this a little bit last week when talking about some of the hackathon stuff we've been working on, but now I want to show it all for realsies on main. This will be coming out, like Brooke said, in 0.28, which should be coming out relatively soon. And then go from there. So actually, you know what? Let me share my whole screen because I'm going to share something in the browser too. Okay. Sorry there. Okay. So what we have here is, first off, the terminal demo. So we now have a plugin subcommand. So I'm going to do a cargo run. And we have this new plugin subcommand. Just give it a second. I'm going to do this build every time. And it's going to show you all the commands we can do here, which is now obviously install, uninstall, and list. So what I'm able to do is actually say plugin list, and it should show my current plugins, which is a Hello plugin I have installed. I'm also able to uninstall a plugin, which I'll do here so I can show it reinstalling. Install Hello. And that removes the plugin for me. And if I list it again, it'll show that nothing's there. Okay, now that's all cool, but we also let you install plugins, and you can install plugins from a file using a file URI, HTTP or HTTPS, and OCI. So I'm going to show doing this with OCI, so I can say install, and I push this plugin to just an OCI registry, GHCR. So I can do that. It'll go ahead and pull down and download it, and then install it. And then once I install it, I can list it again, and I have it in place. Now, when it's installed, what you're able to do, which I think I kind of partially demoed this last week. No, I actually did not get to this last week, now I'm thinking about it. But what this means is now I have a hello subcommand that's part of this. So if I come over here, I can say hello, and I can do dash dash help. And Wash will automatically hook in the command line arguments into it. So everything that I provided inside of my plugin, I have a positional argument that I said is called name. I have an additional option called a foo variable that's in here, which means you get some basic validation. So if I go bar, it's going to tell me that it's an unrecognized flag. And then if I go ahead and pass, oops, didn't mean to hit enter, stop. I can say like foo equals bar, and then I'm going to say Brooks in here. And so if I pass this, it'll run the plugin. The plugin will put out your the arguments that come in. It's basically showing an example of everything. And then it also every plugin has a scratch space, so you can do config and things. This is all available at plugins, and you'll have this scratch. And so I just realized I should probably make that ID and not name. Anyway, okay, I can fix that later. So then I can list the scratch directory, and I can see inside of here for hello, I have a hello text that was written by the plugin into this file. So basically, you have access to a file system that's limited to a specific directory. And only certain things are passed in. So essentially, you have a full lifetime and life cycle of how you can manage plugins. In addition to this, we also did some documentation updates for this, which have merged. It is in um, the toolchain section under Wash. And we have a section for people using Wash plugins that shows basically all the stuff that I just showed, how to run a plugin, how it all works. It talks about what things are granted and how to configure plugins with things like environment variables. And then also if you want to disable plugins. And then um, underneath here, we also have the developer guide for those who are interested in doing this. Um, the nice thing here that I really want to point out, and you keep hearing a lot of us maintainers drive this home, but this is what's so critical about this. You're just going to use wash build and the wash tool chain just like you are for the rest of your things, and those components will run anywhere. Um, in fact, any plugin you write can just be used as a normal CLI. Did I demo that last week? I have a hard time remembering what I did and did not demo, but I think I demoed that last week where I just ran it with wasmTime and I can just run it straight. So these are all components. In fact, I even mentioned this in here. We don't have an example yet, but I'm going to get one. But essentially, all you have to do to turn any other CLI thing straight into a wash plugin is to compose it with the subcommand logic that's needed for wash to register it as a plugin. And so everything here is a plugin. It can be used just like any other component. And I mean, we have the support in the wash tool chain. We have a standard template as well. So if I go to the wasmCloud repo, we now have an examples, and this will be an example when you do wash new component. It'll prompt you as one of the things you can pick is a wash plugin example. And so right now we have one in Rust. We're working on getting some of the HTTP stuff finalized in Go right now. Hint, hint to so people knew about that. So you could write these in Go as well and leverage all of its amazing CLI tools. But inside of here, we have the wash plugin Rust. And this has all the examples of what to do, how to get the WIT and where everything's pulled from, the actual code. This is the example I'm running. And it has some comments on like what it's all doing inside of here. So we basically have a full example ready to go that you can use and kind of base your own plugin off of from there. So it gives you enough to get started and then kind of do some more advanced things. So the only other thing I'll notice, which is called out in our docs, we don't have support for the control interface stuff yet because we're still updating that interface ourselves. As soon as we have the control interface updated, that will be included as one of the imports that you can have inside of your basically plugin. So that way you have access to your lattices based on whatever wash is configured for it. So that's I think it. And I think Brooks has his hand up for a question.
I did have a question, or a suggestion. It's going to be something. Just figure it out. One thing that I really enjoyed doing for our component examples in the wasmCloud repo is like the first set of instructions for like how to run it is how to use wasmTime serve. Do we have anything in here that's like, how do you run this? Do wasmTime run, and that's how you test it, or is it? I think calling that out explicitly is a great like proof. This is using wasmCLI. That's all you need, and HTTP.
Yeah, we can do that. I can add that in. It won't be able to run directly with wasmCLI run if you're importing the control interface in the future. That's going to be the difference here because the control interface is a custom interface that only we support. But we could come up with a way to stub that out for people as well, which is why wasmVirt will be useful. But all in good time, everybody. Any
Yeah,
other questions?
yeah. Sorry, that wasn't even a very constructive question, but this is really great stuff, Taylor. This is great.
Okay. Any other questions, concerns, thoughts, excitement?
I'm super excited to be able to write Go plugins or any other language plugin to our Wash CLI. Thank you, Taylor.
Yeah. So we're just for the future, so we're going to be working on auth plugins, registry plugins, resource plugins. These will all be different types of plugins. using different types of interfaces, and we'll update like the wash plugin command. So just please consider that the wash plugin command is likely to change in its structure and options. This part of wash will stay relatively experimental, but the thing is your plugins that you write are, thanks to the component model, can just be composed into the new thing pretty much transparently to you. So that's what we'll do as we continue to adapt to these things, is if we change the interfaces or anything, we'll probably just automatically adapt it for you before we like we'll just bake the adapter into wash, and then when it loads a plugin that has the old interface, it'll just go schmuck and put it together and dump it back out again. That was my sound for composing. We can come up with a different one. Anyway, that is it, everybody.
Very nice. Very nice.
You know, in the WASM world, we got some space for some new verbs and new acronyms. We can make schmuck a thing. I like it.
Taylor and I were using Whack It while we were at wasm.io. I like that too. Just whack it together.
All right, folks.
It's funny, just a couple hours ago, I was thinking about the implications of WIT contracts and et cetera. And I was thinking, what would it mean to run a component that only had a CLI? And thinking, well, we couldn't do that, or it wouldn't make any sense, but you found a way to do it. So there you go.
All right, folks. Sorry, I had to do one last thing to prepare us for the next part of the session. So what I would really like to do, and we originally were looking at doing this last week, but I appreciate everybody's patience and giving me some time to get together some feedback, just generally from the community, from folks using wasmCloud, some real use cases, all that fun stuff. And I appreciate everybody being here today. But what I want to use essentially the rest of the community call for is an interactive session for roadmap development. So before we get started on that, I want to point out a couple of notable things that have kind of just landed around the wasmCloud ecosystem. This might inform, if you were thinking maybe this should be on the roadmap, it might be already done. One thing, which is a huge thank you to Joe or Mosaka from Microsoft. If you take a look at the commits, he actually added the majority of the logic for an implementation of a WASI Blob Store, but with the Azure Blob Store API. So this can slot in out of the box with WASI Blob Store. You can take like your file system provider and replace it with Azure Blob Store. And this finally just landed. It was functionally complete for a long time. The end of the churn here was kind of myself merging it into the structure of the repository. Taylor really helping me out with a nasty dependency update, all those fun stuff. So just a heads up that there is a new capability provider that just landed. This was really cool to see. Obviously, Wash plugins just landed in Wash, so 0.28 will be going out hopefully a little bit later today, but at least this week. So this is an awesome extension there. wasmCloud is now updated to wasmTime 20, so we're doing a really, really good job of keeping up and to date with the newest engine versions in wasmTime. And this was an easy enough update that this went out as a patch in wasmCloud 1.0.1. And then this one we'll talk about later. I didn't mean to have that in this session, but that's fine. So looking forward at the wasmCloud roadmap, I actually have this Excalidraw site, and I'm going to drop in a link to the Zoom. So everybody's welcome to come join me on this session. You might see some of my other little musings over in the bottom, but I created this big old board for wasmCloud Q2. Now the roadmap itself, I've actually marked this as milestone 1.1, but we don't have a strict order or a strict time release workflow for wasmCloud right now. And I don't want to constrain the next 2 months to being like holding back minor releases, even if we add new features. So might be by the end of Q2, we may be on 1.1, we may be on 1.2. We will not be on 2.0, but we might be releasing multiple new features as a different different minor releases, which would be great. So what I have done is preceded this roadmap with issues that we already have on the wasmCloud board. So if you take a look at the wasmCloud roadmap project in GitHub, I'll send that link as well. Set it up so that any issue that's in the wasmCloud repository that links to the 1.1 milestone will show up on this board. And we might need to rename that depending on minor bumps and all that stuff. But these are things that we know that we need to get done. They're pretty simple or gimme issues like we should finish implementing WASI key value batch, which is already implemented in one of our providers, but we need to expose it in the host, for example. And so my whole goal for this section is, or the rest of this session, I would love to collaboratively do it with all of you, is to brainstorm and get features and documentation and improvements. And these are all loose buckets. We can change them however we like, that we'd like to see over the next 2 to 3 months of wasmCloud development. So I think we can just go ahead and get started. I'm going to try to loosely lead this session, but anybody, please feel free to put your hand up in the Zoom if you have a feature request that hasn't been captured yet, or something that you want to see, or honestly, just copy one of these boxes and throw it on the board. So I'm going to do one quick thing and just draw a little line kind of down the middle of the board here that we can move constantly, but we can just freeform throw tickets below the fold and get them moved up. And the end goal of all of this, of course, is to update the roadmap page alongside with a nice little diagram of what we're working on. I kind of like this columnar view, this kind of flat this flat representation of what we're working on, because there's not a lot in wasmCloud right now, which is a strict dependency of a different feature. Like get this feature done so we can do this feature, so we can do this feature. So I kind of just like the Kanban style. Anybody is welcome to add feedback. So I will just go ahead and get started and talk out loud with some of the things that we've been thinking about. But anybody, like I said, chime in or drop features on your own. I know that we've had a good bit of discussion around documentation on wasmCloud 1.0. We have added and modified a ton of documentation, and there's definitely still more need for things to be documented. So being specific here, I know that we have documentation around creating components for wasmCloud and creating providers for wasmCloud. But we don't really have composition. We don't really have documentation around composing components. That's something that we've kind of put outside of the wasmCloud fold. So to be specific, this is something like wasm tools compose with different components, so you can compose them together and then run them as one component. I think it would be really awesome for us to have kind of first-class documentation around that. This might also include the WAC tool, thank you, Taylor, around composing components together at runtime. So just general WASM composition. This is a good opportunity for documentation. I think we, in that same vein, also have a need for more WRPC, aka WIT RPC documentation. So, things like how it works, when to use it versus composition, things like when you are going to be writing an interface, if you're going to take two components together and compose them together and then ship that as your component, or have them communicate at runtime. Of course, self pat on the back, all of that works out of the box, but we should have documentation on when it's most useful to pick one or both of the patterns. Let's see, around documentation, I know that we also have, I guess taking it a step back, we also have a general need for WIT best practices. So how to design an interface, when to use resources, all of these things are great things to, or great topics to knowledge share around.
That you have to use interfaces
Yep.
to import and export is something that is not obvious potentially.
Yeah, very true. The fact that you have to import and export. Yeah, I think we right now have some documentation around interfaces, what they are, but it's a good call out. Not that this is the only way, this is the way that you're gonna do things. So that's great there. I think we talked about this last week in the community call a little bit as well. The idea of loosely called it like the Natsonomicon, like all things Nats. Of course, we probably won't get into, we'd like to link out to existing documentation, like whenever we talk about streams and key value buckets and things, point to Nats documentation. For those who were in the discussion last week, do you remember what we discussed would be really useful to have around here? I know that Yordis was here talking about this. I think at
Super
least
clusters, I think patterns would be really important to establish. Supercluster being a pattern.
cluster pattern. So kind of in the deploy or in the operator or deployment guide, we can have things like RPC over NATs, which is just core pub sub NATs. Sorry for the nested parentheses. We'll clean up some of these descriptions as we get them into the roadmap. Yep, supercluster pattern. So really talking about, you know what, we'll drop that one. Talk about geo affinity and leaf nodes kind of in general there, which would be great. And then pub sub RPC, specifically someone who's coming from the NATS background. We know that that's not Jetstream. That is just core NATS kind of pub sub. All right, can't get smaller. Victor, around debugging, you thinking that's an addition kind of to documentation here that we can improve?
Yeah, I was thinking just basic stuff around where to look and sort of, if you found yourself with just, something going wrong and you have access to the NATS server and the NATS client, like where would you start?
Yep, that's a great call out. Taylor.
There was something on the live stream, the Bytecode Alliance live stream yesterday that I thought was a really good one to call out in docs here. I think it was Liam not our Liam, the other, the better Liam. I'm wondering if he's here, so I can. Anyway, about having like he called it 0 to 12. I think it was like. I actually think this might be coming in currently. It is coming in currently from Liam. Okay, I am never certain where all of our stream, we have a stream, our messages in different places, but he talked about having a 0 to 12 factor basic CRUD REST API with wasmCloud, like in Rust and Go. So people who are familiar coming from like the 12 factor apps thing that was big around containers have a guide to show that in at least Rust and Go for creating a simple CRUD API. Something more than our hello world, but not necessarily completely fully featured is my guess. But even just having that, like, I love that idea of start. I even like that title, 0 to 12 factor. I think that's kind of a hilarious title.
Isn't there the open API or maybe not open, whatever it is, to like WIT? It's not open API. I'm sorry, I'm blanking.
Yosh made that. He made an open API to WIT and back again generator. It's very rough, and there's I would not. It's not quite ready for usage yet, but is open.
Yeah, but it might be instructive to in such a guide. I don't know if you have your API you know, like, yeah, I mean, maybe it's not, maybe that tool's not ready yet, but I feel like there's something there. Like people usually, it's usually best to start with the docs, right? The API docs, and then whatever. I guess if it's not ready, it's not ready.
Yeah, and I think those will work. And then like the other thing that Liam had mentioned in the current um in his chat was that like it can use whatever kind of RPC, but also like just using all the things. I think like that's what I try. I think all of us have been trying to do that with our latest examples. I think Brooks did this with messaging. I just did this with the plugin example that's new. I think Victor did this with the like HTTP and JSON example, but like showing all the possible like pieces of functionality, even if it's simple. So we should use like wasmConfig. We should use like all of those kind of things in and it should talk to a database of some kind. So like using WASI key value to store something. So I think maybe having that in the 0 to 12 factor app would be really good. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think personally, like hearing that, like that's probably one of the most important things we could do, because if we can get that example in place, we can start to hang a lot of other things off the top of it. Because if we have a 12 factor app example that helps people convert from what they know to what this allows you to do, and then we start showing things like, oh, you want to compose something? Here's when you might want to compose it. Here's when you might not want to compose it, and here's how you do it. And like show them all that stuff. It also is like a nice entry point into like wit to WDAM and that kind of thing.
Or how about, I mean, I think maybe this is the next level, but let's just say you have a common library, right? And I don't know if we're there yet to saying it, but if you had a common whatever, how to pass that around as a WIT, not as a library anymore, kind of thing. I mean, that's not necessarily going to be possible if there's async kind of stuff, but I feel like that's kind of the next step of what we want to do with WIT, right? In the term of the language agnostic kind of thing. And so like, I don't know, let's just say you had a library that did, compression, or, I mean, I'm just trying to think of a dumb example, but something that's really common, but specific to your whatever workflow. And we pass around a WIT, and then what does the WDAM look like if for that? I don't know. And what do the WIT files look like?
Yeah, I added that actually up here as how to bring it
Sure.
in as a WIT. I think that it's a great, like, it's great motivation for that document. It's like, here's this common library. You don't care about what language it was written in. How do you bring it in?
Yeah. And was it Robin was Robin talk about that? Was that this meeting last week?
Last week.
So hey, bringing in, okay, I found a WIT I want, right? I don't know. I'm just repeating what we're saying, but I'm just trying to get that sort of workflow, which I think is like what we're enabling here.
I'm gonna, so a little hint here, something I didn't drop yet. The OCI working group, the WASM working group that I'm part of in the CNCF. We've been working on an OCI thing that is now basically being accepted as the guidance for how to do an OCI specification that has stuff like some of the information from the world and all that, so then it can be indexed and consumed by everything else. Brooks pinged this in there. I'm not going to take any more time here, but that'll kind of help enable those kind of things. So I was going to get to that when we got to our new features and stuff, because I already submitted some things for that, and we'll be working on that soon.
Yeah, it's kind of obvious, but.
All right. Yeah, I really like this 0 to 12 factor type thing. Because we just had a question in the wasmCloud Slack the other day saying, given great feedback, like I can see 100 HTTP hello world examples, but not too much beyond that. So getting beyond that would be great. Okay. We could probably talk about documentation the whole time. So I'm gonna try to propose a couple of features. Again, everybody, please feel free to just raise hand or jump in here around things that you'd like to see in wasmCloud. One thing that came up during the wasmCloud hackathon, which if you haven't actually read this blog, it's the first blog on the wasmCloud site. Highly recommend checking that out. It's kind of just a summary of what we demoed last week in the community meeting, but it is fun. And one of those aspects is long running wasmCloud workloads. So anybody who may not have messed with it or done something more than a FASI style use case for wasmCloud knows that when you invoke a component, you have a certain amount of time to complete that invocation. It's something in the order of 2 to 5 seconds. You can override that. But what we recommended for a long time is to essentially push those long running workloads into capability providers and have kind of an asynchronous event driven potentially model to complete those long running interactions. So you would request that work starts and then you get a notification that it completed. So we really start to keep looking at use cases. We see that doesn't fit all of the that doesn't fit all the molds. We also see that it's very, very useful to be able to do this long running computation in components itself. The components are the business logic, so you want to be doing your computation there. So I think long running wasmCloud workloads are going to be a great feature to prioritize over this milestone, making it in 1.1 and 1.2. Dan was the original steward of that project during the hackathon, which we may not have demoed in the community call last week, actually. But the TLDR there, I think, for the RFC that should be coming up pretty soon is a mechanism of letting you allow a component to execute for a certain amount of time, constrain its RPC timeouts, because it's not just adding an upper bound on computation or how long a component can execute. It's also doing nice things on behalf of the user to make sure that components don't get stuck timing out on an HTTP request forever. Having that circuit breaker pattern is important in a highly distributed system. So this one I've proposed and is on the roadmap already. Of course, if folks do not feel that is, oh, hey, OCI, don't feel that should be on the roadmap, you're welcome to speak up as well. But that's the one that is already here. One that is actually also already on the roadmap that I don't have captured yet is a feature that we wanted to land for 1.0 and ultimately just got pushed to the next milestone is updating provider configuration at runtime. So with the whole new method of named configuration, if you have config that you've put in wasmCloud and you change it, it will actually automatically be updated for all the components that are using that config. So the next time they go to fetch configuration values, they'll get the new values. But we don't deliver updates to capability providers. And this is just the documented method that it works with 1.0. But updating the configuration at runtime is definitely a great additive feature so that providers can get updates for config. So I think that this would be a great thing to add in the next milestone. I have a few other things that I know we've been RFCing around and talking about. One is wasmCloud Postgres. So I'll just get that out before I forget about it. But do folks have let me pause for a second. Do folks want to add in any tickets or add any suggestions here for things that they'd like to see? I like seeing all
there
the
any thoughts? I don't know if it's really a documentation, but share around does what changes with sharing with different WADMs sharing like what used to be providers? Is there any work that needs to be done around that with this move away from providers?
Yeah, great question. So we did change the model of the way that WADA maps would share providers between. Basically, now each app gets their own provider. We improved the ability to do like multi-tenant, not multi-tenant. We improved the ability to run an isolated provider per application, which just means they just get their own instance. But we don't have any ability right now for apps to share a provider between two different applications.
Okay. So, all right, maybe that's okay, but I think probably eventually you'd want to, yeah.
Yeah, we have some prior art here for already defined. Well, we do it specifically with configuration. If you specify a config in a WATM manifest and you don't provide any properties or config values, WATM assumes that that config already exists. So you can have an externally, when I mean externally, it's just outside of that one app managed resource, and WATM can hook into that. Maybe the whole change here is that we can do the same for a component or for a provider. So
Yeah.
you could
And
have
by
some,
yeah. Oh, sorry. And by move away from providers, we change the name.
uh, wait,
Sorry,
sorry.
somebody asked the question. Sorry, somebody asked the question. I was like, what I meant. We don't call them. We call actors components. We call providers. I'm sorry. This is what do we call providers now?
We used to
Oh,
call them capability
Oh,
providers. We just
capability
shortened it
providers.
to
Oh, we just call it
providers.
providers. All right. Yeah. WIT-based. So sorry, WIT-based providers.
mhm.
Be clear. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to think if you had a database connection, and let's just say you might not, and you had different, no, I guess still, I'm just still trying to think of microservices. You still wouldn't, they might get a point where you would want to share a connection pool between, depending on how small we make our services and how small we make our WADAM, like how micro we get.
Yeah.
But I think for the most part, you wouldn't want different like microservices sharing the same provider.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're hitting the right thing there. It depends on how lightweight the provider can be. Like if the provider is a really lightweight connector, then whatever, run one
Well,
per app.
it's more that like, hey, the database can only handle so many concurrent connections, right? And you don't want to be flooding the database.
Yeah.
Like you don't want to be like locking up the server side. But I mean, it's a kind of a bad practice to have microservices sharing your databases. Like, although it happens.
I would just summarize this as there needs to be people will want to reuse the resources here because the idea is to increase the like there's multi-tenancy concerns, there's resource um there's sort of density issues, there's all those. So I think just having something that lets us reference something that's already running would be a good thing. I think that's the important detail here.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, it's really an application decision whether you use it or not. So as long as you have both abilities, then you're just adding.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely some use cases I can think of where you would need it.
Yeah, that feels nice. At least to have a some experimentation and like if this is your use case, here's what you can do. That sounds great for and that should work. Just that should be at the WATM level, I think. There shouldn't be anything that needs to change in wasmCloud for that, which is great. I know that we also yeah, please put those in the PR for sure. We will, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but anything that gets thrown on this roadmap board, I'm probably just going to wholesale lift this diagram out and put it on the roadmap. But everything here that's not captured on the GitHub roadmap will get turned into GitHub issues and appropriately tagged and then worked through that process. My whole goal is to make this a really easy, open thing that we repeat kind of quarterly and get to do this planning and burn down the issues together. It's a lot of shared context from this community call too when people go to actually implement this issue. It would be great to see the motivation kind of where it came from. So glad we're doing it.
Is anybody doing anything already in regards to like OpenID providers or federated identity providers and things like that?
I know that Bailey had an example from a previous conference that used, I think it was OIDC for like a HTTP login, but I'm not aware of that now. But that sounds like that would be that sounds like maybe a provider that could be reused per app or something, like
Yeah,
something, not
yeah,
something.
exactly.
For app authentication instead of yeah, you mean app authentication, not people authentication, or do you mean both? I mean, you can use it for both,
I mean
but
both. I mean
yeah,
both.
yeah. I mean,
Because
just
where I'm
it,
coming from is it would sure be nice to just have something. I mean, I'm barely scratching the surface here, guys. I figure after Memorial Day is when I actually kick into this stuff. But yeah, where I'm coming from is I've been doing a lot of work like that on the current app that I'm working in. It'd be nice to have that all nice little box with a ribbon around it that I just call as a provider.
yeah. I mean, I think Nats kind of solves the service to service part a little bit, or at least. But if you wanted to tie in like IAM, because you can use in AWS IAM, you can set bring your own OIDC, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you want your provider that's making calls to DynamoDB to just be natively in working with IAM, right? I think
Yeah,
I'm on a track here, right? Like,
yeah, you're kind of going down the AWS track
but
there.
AWS, but yeah, but other, it's not like OIDCs. It's not like it's just
Right,
limited to
yeah.
them. Yeah.
Yeah, where I was actually coming from, what I'm doing now is I'm doing that for actual Nats accounts
Oh,
and things like that. So it's like it actually goes out and produces a Nats account for a user as I'm going through Synadia,
Mhm.
and so I'm playing that game where you go in and develop a user underneath an actual Nats account so that it's a separate app that's actually talking to another app. Uh, as sort of a login where the client actually is like like a registered user who has a client that then talks directly to
is
Nats. I
there?
was just
Yeah,
wondering if
yeah.
anybody's actually looking at that at all or anything like that, because that might be an area once I kind of get more of this under my belt that I could kind of delve into
Vance
as
is
well.
Vance is typing away about it.
Yeah, Vance is addressing OpenID Connect in the Catalyst project, it looks like, or in their
Cool.
Catalyst project, which just seems well, I'd like to learn more about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Vance,
there'll
why don't
be
I hit you up here in a month or so? We'll talk.
well in a month or so would be good. I'm not the actual one who's handling that part of the project, but our project is one of the services that we're addressing because it's one of the key services in the Kubernetes based canvas, and we're presenting an alternative based on wasmCloud.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah, I'd be very interested in looking at that.
Yeah, whenever you talk about it, please. If you can share that stuff publicly, I would love to hear about it in the wasmCloud Slack. I'm sure others have the same question.
When you mentioned Synadia, do they offer something that isn't packaged in Nats?
No,
That,
not
okay.
really. I
All
mean,
right.
it's just basically it's a really cool way to just get it so you're not hosting anything. Their freebie
Yeah.
stuff is really easy to set
Hosted
up,
Nats.
and yeah, exactly. So they give you like 10 connections, I think,
I see
and
that we
for
also
free
have
and low volume, and you're fine. So for just playing around, it's been great.
yeah, let's keep moving on with the roadmap stuff. I see that we have a couple questions on various socials. Liam, one of the Liams, had a question on X, which is around love to learn how to write my front end in a JavaScript framework like Svelte and then call a different language for the business logic. I think we have a GitHub discussion around this one. I don't know where it fits on the roadmap, but I think on the WebAssembly side, we can at least do a spike on front end frameworks and WASM because I think I don't really know where this fits in terms of uh, what this would be in terms of changes to wasmCloud, but taking a look and if it's feasible to get these front end frameworks compiled to Wasm or getting them integrated with wasmCloud, that would be a really cool experiment.
So something like like Flutter or something like a front end back end type of, or HTML, like is that the kind of the idea, like an integrated front end back end solution, and how would wasmCloud work with that? Is that the
Yeah,
idea? Okay.
yeah.
Or like
That's
you could do an HTMX and WASM. That might be a little conceptually simpler, because a lot of that,
Yeah, it
sometimes
feels
that
like an
stuff,
example.
yeah. But I think you could actually make, I mean, so this is going to be something somebody hopefully does. Like a series of plugins for a front end framework that are suited for wasmCloud.
Yeah, one of the things that I was trying over the Cosmonic Hackathon was exactly this, bundling Next into a WebAssembly module that runs inside of wasmCloud. That's one part of it. There's also then the client, the UI, accessing WebAssembly to be able to like get into the lattice. That's another way of doing that. But then the comment also mentions WRPC, which might actually be another way of doing that, is just like making the client compatible WRPC and making calls across the lattice to that. Because if you can get you can get a WebSocket connection from the browser to a NAT's lattice, you could do that
Oh,
over the lattice that way too.
I would love a
Um,
deep dive in how you can have browsers connect to a WebSocket to get into the lattice, and
that's
ties
how
in
the
with the,
washboard works.
well, yeah, but I know, but how that works.
Sure, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, because that ties in with the OIDC thing. Like, you got an OIDC, Nats knows who the Nats can identify the user by
yeah, for
whatever
sure.
their identity is, and then that would be pretty cool.
It would be, and that's something that we're thinking about. Yeah, that's a good call, Brooks. But yeah, because at the moment the washboard it has no authentication knowledge at all. It assumes that the NATS leaf node that it's connecting to has the credentials, and that you're just connecting directly to the WebSocket unauthenticated. But it would be awesome to be able to say like connect directly to a lattice using credentials with some sort of auth in there. That would be awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be amazing.
So would the vision here be let me just propose something here that we'd create like an npm package for React that will connect back to the lattice. So you could call wasmCloud microservices directly from the React UI.
And yes, that's theoretically that's what the washboard does right now. Is that we do have a package. It's not published anywhere, but it is an npm package that does do exactly that. It just doesn't have the authentication piece there.
Yeah, but if we had that, then you would suddenly then you would open up this whole world where I think what Liam, the other Liam, the younger, more handsome version of myself in the Netherlands, watching it on YouTube, I think, is asking for is he wants to pick up the world of existing like React templates and UI kits and stuff like that. So if we would release this one little tiny piece of glue, we now connect two vast ecosystems together and let the floodgates begin.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's not the first one time we've heard it either. Um, we keep hearing this. It'd be great to be able to access the wasmCloud lattice over JavaScript, using JavaScript. Doing it from the client is one thing, doing it from the node side is another, and then getting that node code into WebAssembly is another thing again. All things that I definitely want to cover and eventually support. But yeah,
Yeah, I like this.
Yeah,
I captured this at least as releasing the washboard functionality as some npm package. This is great stuff to have. Yeah, I mean, this would be released separately from 1.1 or 1.2. This is on our quarter two, though. It's great.
yeah.
Oh, good. The side channel. This is great stuff. I started a new column actually over here for examples, which may not get dropped into the final roadmap page, but at the very least, these things are going to be, because examples are something that are a little more independent, but these will be great to put on the actual roadmap as well. Whatever we can do with the front end frameworks and the OpenID authentication example be awesome. Um, I know, oh, one other thing that kind of moving on there. I know we're getting close to the top of the hour. I am probably just going to continue road mapping until we get this done because this is on my to-do list. So anybody is welcome to stay along afterwards. Since we're 5 minutes till, I want to pause really quick. Is there anybody that has something they'd like to suggest for the roadmap that has a hard stop at 2? I just want to make sure that I'm respectful of your time. You can get in your feedback before we ramble on for too long.
I'd like to add a Go provider SDK to new features since we have so many different Gophers that are coming into our community. And now that Go is shaping up pretty well, I think having more Go support and a feature like the Go provider SDK would be wonderful. I think secondarily it would be cool to have a TypeScript SDK, but I think if I was doing it in priority order, I'd start with Go.
Okay. Yeah, this is what I'm forgetting, but we actually had a yeah, Roman did demo last week in the community call, WRPC working in Go. So we have the basic the basics for RPC in Go already. So just wrapping that up in the provider SDK is the work there. I think that's totally feasible. That would be great. I am a little concerned with TypeScript, but only because we don't have the WRPC base there. So I might just mark this not that way. I might mark this as like a yellow.
So you just have it. I mean, I think the only problem with so TypeScript, you have to get, we'd be using Node, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's always, I guess it's unavoidable at some point, but that's kind of fraught.
Yeah.
Or
Like,
Dino, maybe.
do we use Bun? Do we, like all this stuff?
I actually
all
really like Bun.
Yeah,
but okay,
rusty.
maybe we should just go ahead and eat this one because we got a lot of boxes already.
It's good though. I mean, it's definitely something, but yeah.
I'm gonna write it down
fraught.
as a spike so that we can at least investigate what the requirements here would be, because the current capability provider requirements must be in a language that you can connect to NATS, or you're willing to write your own NATS SDK. Thank you, Apple. You need WRPC, so we have that in Rust and we have that in Go. You need to be able to receive something over standard in and then like be able to basically execute it as a standalone binary. So that last one brings some questions around TypeScript that I think would be really good to answer. Because it might be easy. Like if you have a Python runtime installed on a system, you could run a Python thing, but checking for that is something that we would have to either take responsibility of for wasmCloud or just say, hey, all you people trying to do this, make sure your wasmCloud host is running somewhere where there's a runtime available. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that all sounds great. Another thing that we have an RFC out there about that I think brings in a lot of possible rabbit holes or difficulties in implementation is pluggable secrets management for wasmCloud. We have pluggable configuration now. I think we have a pretty quick road to implementing secrets in terms of storing them in a NATS object store or KV bucket and then encrypting that on disk. And then you have your authentication to the lattice. So that's behind mechanism. But that really is all just treating the configuration more like a secret And my biggest concern with doing that is that in the real use cases of the world, you're not going to have your secrets available to you so that you can just throw them into this NATS object store thing. So I think the pluggable part is a really important piece there. I see some nodding, which means I didn't say anything horribly wrong. But do folks have other things around secrets management? Like,
Yeah, I think the story when I first asked that question, I think we talked about that like very early on. The OIDC was definitely, I mean, we're talking like 2 or 3 years ago. um, and I think the answer was at that time, it was so early on, it was like, oh, just use Vault as a KV store. But I don't know if that's actually gonna be mature solution, right? I mean, I think that was like the initial solution, but if we want to be treating secrets differently than, because I don't think you want to be going through a provider or a provider every time you need secrets. I think that seems bad. Seems bad.
right. That is kind of you can definitely still do that now. However, that
Right.
is somewhat of the flaw there that a secret grabbed with the vault provider will eventually need to transmit over the lattice, and we don't have a first class primitive for protecting that.
Yeah.
We could
And
do encryption for RPC.
right. And I think
But
also just the resiliency of the system too. If your provider goes down, you've nothing works, right? Like you've now made this part of your critical infrastructure, which if it's part of NATS, right? If it gets pulled in once, or it's not needed for every single request, things like that, right? It has to be more as it's just, yeah, it's kind of fragile.
there's definitely the idea that wasmCloud can run as a flat topology network everywhere. I mean, like really easy to extend. So when I have my core service in some cloud, that may be able to easily hit the cloud API for accessing secrets. If we go down like the AWS example, I could easily, even within my private VPC, hit my secrets store. However, if I were to extend that application, so like I'm running a wasmCloud host also locally, that would not have access to things that are just exposed to a private VPC. So there's a lot here.
Yeah, you don't want a leakage of secrets through with the lattice that you don't want to be going. But yeah, it's a little tricky.
Yeah, we have a decision to make there. Because we could have some mechanism to pull the secret on the host that has access to it and then transmit it. But then do you want that? So we may not want that at all. And this might be something that comes down to um, essentially some kind of plugin to wasmCloud to be able to access your secrets, but it's not something that we transmit over the lattice.
Wait, sorry, I think I'm missing something conceptually, and we're over 2:03, so sorry, it's 3 past the hour here. So I think this is a really, really important topic. So, I mean, I think it kind of goes to the nature of NATS and the nature of kind of having a distributed multi-cloud solution, and what you want to go through the multi-cloud solution and what you don't want to go through the multi-cloud solution for all sorts of reasons, including like networking costs and secret leak and having some sort of like containing of problems and things like that. Which NATS NATS definitely has ideas around this, but I think the secret thing is super important. Like what's the secret life cycle look like across a big distributed NATS, and there's a lot there.
Something that I've done at the company I used to work for, we worked with really heavily invested in like a tokenization strategy for transmitting secrets. I think that that's something that could definitely work over a distributed network. I think it would allow you to share things. It's just ultimately when you need to turn that token into a secret is the really critical piece. I don't think I have enough information or research. I don't have enough strongly held opinions on this right now to say how we would do it, but it sounds like we're getting +1s on the different social channels. We're getting nods. This is an important feature, so it should definitely be here. I did bring this up. I've kind of just passively navigated to it and went to and put it in the Zoom chat, but actually we're on like issue or PR number like 2000 now. So this is a kind of a not actually that long ago in terms of time, but talking about bringing your own key storage. And I think we did talk about oh hey, I talked about this. Good job, past me, around the difference between signing keys but then actually accessing secrets live. So I this one is pinned, but we're going to be bringing this one back up probably, or at least superseding this with an issue with RFC or more information. Oh, hey, Liam joined the call. Nice. Okay. Well, we definitely talked about secrets management. Why don't we keep on moving? As Colin mentioned, we're definitely past the hour, but you're getting wasmCloud community stream long form today. Thanks everybody for hanging out. So two things that I did throw on the improvement side. One, which I've been experimenting around, which I'm really excited about, is release automation around specifically Wash, but Wash depends on many different crates in the wasmCloud monorepo, and releasing all of them in a correct chain is something that's really important. I have been hacking on this in where is it? Cargo Smart Release is the project, but the smart releaser demo, I've been working on this. I wanted to share this diagram because I like it. Thanks, Colin. Anything else before you head out? Oh, and he's gone. Guess not. So I've been working on Cargo Smart Releaser. What I really want is to improve how quickly we're able to deliver a new version of wasmCloud or Wash to everybody in the community. So one button push to get a new version of Wash out is great. We also filed an issue so that Wash can download a newer version of wasmCloud or of Wadum that's a patch bump automatically. I think that that'll be really, really nice. And additionally, making our error output better for the common things that you hit in the wasmCloud ecosystem. So, trying to make an invocation over a link where you slightly misspell the interface, for example, that one should have a really nice error message. These are just improvements that I think should make it into the next release, and they can all be patches. One request that I did get somewhere in Slack from folks who are, I think it was actually Dan or Jonas, I forget, around their work with the wasmCloud operator. So working in a Kubernetes context, that it would be really nice to have a host configuration file. So when you start up the wasmCloud binary, you can either give it a bunch of environment variables or flags. Or it'd be really nice to be able to just point it at some JSON, TOML, YAML, pick your markup language of choice, and start up a host with consistent configuration. I think that's a pretty easy improvement that we can add to the configuration story for wasmCloud. So I like it. Folks have any other any comments around the host configuration file? Or like if you think this would be useful? Nice. We'll consider it. One other thing that we've seen around companies and developers getting to try out wasmCloud, especially as we drop 1.0. I think we've done a really, really good job of having wasmCloud slot in with existing tools like OpenTelemetry and observability things. But one thing that kind of consistently comes up in terms of running the binary or the container in a more controlled environment is signed artifacts. So I think it would be really great to have our binaries and our containers that we publish signed with something like not Sigstore. I'm thinking of a couple of different things here. Oh yeah, here, Liam. I'll drop it to you. Maybe tough. What am I thinking of? Cosign, yeah. So just generally signing the binaries and the containers that we release for wasmCloud for interrogation from a central authority and making sure that these are actually the correct artifacts that we've published. Yeah, just general toolchain security. Toolchain security. Yeah, we've had a couple of asks here to to make sure that we have these. So I think this would be great. Just small improvements whenever we cut a release. These artifacts are not just coming from the repository, but they are also signed. This would be great. Something. I was trying to think. We're going to be adding a lot of a lot of new features and improvements to wasmCloud. I've been looking ahead a little bit at WASI 0.3, which is great. There's a lot of new things coming in 0.3. Some of the interfaces are being improved, like HTTP is getting a really nice interface improvement. And as we move forward, I think it would be really great to experiment with some of these things before they actually go live. So I had the idea of being able to do feature flags for wasmCloud. So this is something that you would need to maybe compile wasmCloud from a source when it comes to feature flags, or install from a specific set of things. But just having a mechanism in place for people to try out these experimental features, I think would be really nice. There are some projects out there, like in the CNCF, like Open Feature, that I think would be really cool to play around with. I don't know if Open Feature has a Rust SDK though.
They do.
Nice.
I don't know if it's fully feature complete, but it wouldn't be too difficult to.
Okay, so we can put a feature flag out there to make sure that we can put a feature flag out there to turn on Open Feature because it's experimental, and then we can use Open Feature to feature flag our other experiments. Great, call it done. This is something that I think probably qualifies as a spike, just figuring out the right way to deliver experimental features inside of the runtime. It'd be really nice to be able to do that because we followed that model with Wash and it works great. I just know that delivering that on the runtime is a little more complex because you don't want to ship to production with optional features or the experimental features. Improvements is pretty broad. I think that some of these can go into documentation and new features, but folks have things in improvements or bug fixes that we'd like to bring up here. Don't know if there's any more on the roadmap today. This one would probably be good to capture here. Updating in the scale component command, just improving the ergonomics of scale versus update. This would be a good one to have in improvements. Let me capture that. Not too much has come up in the Nats column. Oh, yeah. So that thing that I opened up earlier and then I wasn't really going to talk about. Now's the time where we get to talk about it. So there is a new PR going into the component model repo here pretty soon. It's been approved and had some iteration. I guess it's been going on for a little while, but adding and this has actually changed since the PR opened, but an unstable and a since gate to WIT. So this is when you're working with a WebAssembly component. You can have in your interface something like, hey, here's this function A. But for this interface, since version 0.2.1, there's also support for function B. And since version 0.2.2, when you have this feature enabled, you can have access to function C. So all of this, or this one is specifically focusing on functions, but you can also gate interfaces, types, and interfaces as well. So I would highly recommend folks go check out this PR, but this is probably going to be a core way that we add support for WASI 0.2.1, the updates to interfaces in wasmCloud. So, I mean, I don't see a reason to deviate from the the standard here, and since it might come up, I'm going to add that into the WebAssembly column to implement the unstable and since, what do we call it? Directives, gates. Gates to awesome. Yeah, Taylor.
Also kind of in WebAssembly, kind of not, is we're going to need to implement the new OCI stuff that I was talking about. I already created a thing and added it into the 1.1 milestone for you to have later, Brooks, but I'll probably be doing that, but we should probably have it on the roadmap.
Yeah, I think that fits in WebAssembly. So, what did you call it on the roadmap? Support for new WASM OCI artifact type.
Yeah, it's kind of a cross between the WASM side and the wash side, because wash will have to be updated to use the right tooling, and then the host will have to be updated to use that as well. And so it's not like super major. We'll still have support for all the old stuff too. Just we'll have support for the new stuff.
Cool. So we basically add the support to the host to be able to download from the new type, and then wash can go out only pushing to the new type and stuff like that.
Yes, exactly. It can pull from the old type, push only with the new type. And then we'll also do the same thing to adapt providers to that.
Nice.
So,
yeah, that'd be great. Is it worth also in the same vein, since we're using providers for it, Taylor, adding the feature where we split provider binaries by OCI or by artifact layers so that you can just download the layer that matters to you by architecture? Or do you think
you know
that's
what? Yes, that was my plan. As we were going to store each binary as its own individual layer and then pull unique layers that way. So there's no longer going to be a Parcheesi as much as an OCI artifact type. I think we'll keep Parcheesi as a portable, like for portable artifact for like air gaps and those kind of things. But honestly, like I think for most people, you'll just use OCI and then there'll be layers.
I think it's pretty reasonable. So providers and OCI as artifact layers, according to.
I'll add that to that issue I created as well, just so I don't
Awesome. Yeah.
forget that.
Obviously, providers are not WASM, but we can follow the same structure and then make them WASM. One thing, I don't know if anybody moving the line here. I don't know if anybody has tried to do this in WebAssembly, but something that I've definitely realized and we've definitely been looking at as we write apps using 1.0 is native testing and debugging support would be amazing. And I think there's a lot of questions here, but the question comes up every single time you do the royal you does a WebAssembly talk at a conference. The first hand up is like, how's the debugging story look? So I think we should put some formal effort into this. So test automation for WASI components would be awesome. Just kind of doing some brainstorming about this before with a couple of people. I think Bailey, we talked a little bit about it. Using or having a mocking framework for like unit tests. Using WASI-virt or virtualization support for tests is a great use case there. Debugging in the IDE, like being able to step through code, would be amazing. So I think at the very least, it's worth some of our effort to see if we can get this going. A language agnostic framework would be perfect here. Although doing things language specific may be the right move. It kind of just depends on if we want people to have like a WASM consistent experience or a consistent experience with like the way that they're used to developing their language.
Yeah, Bailey and I also had this conversation, and there's some kind of ideas going on that aren't fully fleshed out yet.
Okay. Well, this will at least make it on the roadmap as like a tag or whatever. But sounds like RFC incoming from evil mastermind Bailey. That would be great. Bailey, I was also watching the Bytecode Alliance community stream from last night, and you and Joel were talking a lot about C# support. Where is that? Should we?
Oh yeah.
We get a lot of for what it's worth, I don't know if everybody sees this, but if you go into like our quick start, we have a little form. It's like, hey, if you don't use these languages on the day to day, what do you like to use? Like maybe we could add support for it. And we get a ton for C sharp. So is that in a place that we should consider like adding templates, adding examples for that?
Yeah, one, thank you for plugging the Bytecode Alliance community stream, which is available on YouTube at Bytecode Alliance. Yeah, I hosted Joel Dice last night, and he has written the generator for Python. He did the TVM one. He's re-enhanced it again for async for Rust. So he is binding guy. And we in the C# working group, which is a subgroup of the SIG-Guest languages under the Bytecode Alliance, we're a little stuck on how to implement resources for C#. And that was like our last remaining thing for getting the bindgen working the way that we expected it to. Now, if you know me, you know that I'm a huge optimist. So when I say last remaining thing, like maybe, I don't know, times it by 10. But it was the last big thing that we thought we had that was blocking us from having full bindgen. We have set up a lot of the artifact automation for it in the BA, but Joel came in, spent a week on it, got us resource bindgen working, and he created a demo working with wasmHTTP, which, he's like, it's a hello world demo. And I'm like, don't sell yourself short. Getting wasmHTTP working is hardcore. So that hits like all the edge cases for WIT. So we're past that. Now, what does that mean? There is a special branch, LLVM AOT branch on C#, and today there's some tricks that we have to do to get the builds working on Mac OS and anywhere. It's not that it's tied to Windows, but it's more like we built an LLVM toolchain over there, and so now we just got to get it building for all the other places. And yeah, so there's work to be done. And that special branch is inside .NET/Runtime Labs on GitHub. Runtime Labs is a place where we're able to kind of add extensions to the .NET framework. But yes, as Victor put in here, tricks, aka black magic. There are tricks in Hackery that you can do to get something working today. But I think that there's a lot that needs to be smoothed out so that somebody could just come in and install and run and install these things. But now that we're unblocked, I expect lots of progress to happen over the next month.
Nice. Yeah, thank you for the whole update. So with a lot of kind of tricky tricks going on and like a lot in flight, I don't quite feel confident throwing it on our roadmap, like add support. But I do think it's really worth watching and having it. So I probably won't include it in the roadmap, but I do think it's really worth watching. And as soon as we can have an experiment going with C#, I think that opens the door to add that. So let's just keep an eye on it. Please, Bailey, let me know if there's something that I can play with, because as soon as it's possibly available, I will do a wash build plus wash app deploy with a C# component. That'd be really cool.
Yeah, I will let you know, and of course, if you're able to build that component outside of the wash toolchain, just using normal component tools, wasmCloud will support it day one. We don't have to make any changes to support it. What we mean about adding it on our roadmap is documentation, examples, and then first-party support inside wash, so that it just knows the right things to call.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, let's see. I think that there might be, I don't know if I really touched on it, but like implementing the rest of WASI key value will be a really good thing to have on the WebAssembly side. I think that there is constant movement on the wasmCloud front, but I don't have a strong action item there to bring in anything new. We launched wasmCloud 1.0. If you wanted to see the reference here under WASI, You can see the list of interfaces that we support out of the box with the host, mostly under interfaces, but WASI blob store, WASI config, HTTP key value, all that stuff. So I think the only other thing to mention here, which I'll put it here on the roadmap because it's happening actively and it's really cool, but there's not really too much more action items here. Is the component model value encoding issue, which Roman is actually working on. And if you haven't seen this before, this is actually standardizing the way that we serialize or we can encode component model values using WIT RPC. So WRPC, the framework that we're using with wasmCloud to do our distributed component invocations, the value encoding, the way that we do that is being contributed upstream to the component model, which is really, really cool to see. So that is just making it so that that individual part of what we do is also standardized, which is really cool. But this one might actually not make it onto the final roadmap because there's not too much to do there. It's almost done. So really, really cool. Other than that, I think this is a great call out from Colin earlier around applications in Wadham. I think that we have a general need for architecture diagrams for Wadham, everywhere from how internally the system works in terms of scalars to the reconciliation loop to our use of NAT streams. I think that would be really informative. So that should go on to, yeah, it should go into our roadmap. That's something that I was thinking of taking on. Additionally, what we've seen, I got this feedback from Dan and Jonas, who've been working on the wasmCloud operator. It would be great to have a little more extensibility of the Wadham manifest. So we use OAM as the specification format, and there's a lot of options there to make the manifest extendable. But what we've kind of shrunk it down to a subset that really just works for applications, which is great. It's a minimal manifest. It's great for specifying wasmCloud applications. I think here what we want is mostly traits for configuration of external. What's the right way to put this? External infrastructure / platforms. So to put this another way, it would be great to have the manifest format be extendable so that you can add in extra information that a platform like Kubernetes or Nomad or insert cloud provider could use and parse the manifest to be able to set up resources outside of the wasmCloud environment. And the reason why this wouldn't really work today is anything in the manifest that Wadham doesn't know about, we are going to ignore and then deserialize away. But being able to keep that around would be really nice for running on different platforms. Hey, Liam. Wait, I thought you left. Welcome back. Would feel that more ops. Oh, go ahead if you wanted to surface it. Maybe not. I thought you were muted.
Oh, right. I didn't even realize I was unmuted. Hey. Yeah, indeed. I had to run for a bit, but then came back for a quick second. Yeah. I mean, I just was sharing a little bit about ops info capability. So I think a lot of people picking up on things visually is a great way to learn and to get familiar with the space. Especially when copying and pasting like IDs of different actors or providers or etc. with the wash bands. Like it's doable. It works great, and especially if you're familiar with it, it's a very natural way of working. But yeah, when entering into it and wrapping your head around all of this new stuff, all these new concepts and everything, that yeah, I just feel like being able to extract or get at some of that information and get at some of the capabilities that you guys have built already via the UI. I feel like that would be a powerful addition to yeah. Just actually full stop.
Yeah, I like that. So
Not sure how you guys feel about that.
yeah, so kind of taking the basically extending the wasmCloud dashboard, right? So more than just inventory and config listing, kind of adding information like what a little more information on the components that are running, possibly even since it's all over NATs, like information about the invocations that are going over the lattice, things like that.
Yeah, basically, I'm just thinking more like Kubernetes dashboard. I think, if somebody's diving to Kubernetes the first time, yeah, you can read the book, or you can just like deploy the dashboard and then click around and be like, oh, what's this thing? Oh, okay, there's like pods have a relationship to this. Oh, okay, this is deployment, etc. And I think being able to facilitate the same kind of experience with the dashboard, I think that would be valuable. Uh,
Yeah. Um, kind of brainstorming on the title of this ticket here, so people feel free to chime in.
Liam, I sense a kinship with you now that I hear you talk. There's a bit of an accent there. But yes, I'm actually actively working on making the washboard, the Lattice Client Core, a little more flexible so that it does have that. And one of the first things that I've been playing with while doing that is exactly that, like being able to add extra tools that like so you can send a NAS request just over the lattice without having to go and poke around in the CLI, and exactly that, being able to do more stuff in the UI that you can do on the CLI without having to just like type a bunch of commands to see what's available. You can just click and poke around.
awesome. Sounds exciting. Love it.
I like it. I like it a lot. Yeah. And then maybe if we do this, we can publish it as an NPM package. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. Okay. I'm running a little low on creative inspiration steam. I feel like I got out all the things that I'm really interested in, the things that as we were leading up to 1.0, make the hard call like, hey, this isn't going to make it in this milestone, and that's okay. We're going to add new features, and we have a ton of work to do. I'm seeing kind of a theme here. If you really look at there's one bug fix here, which actually I think Taylor and I are going to work on right after we finish this. Around the WebAssembly and Wash and Wadham architecture diagrams as documentation. These are new features in these different projects or maybe improvements. So I think examples will probably be captured separately, but I do still really like the idea of a 3-column workflow. And as a straw man, I would propose, I mean, that's not extra large, that documentation, new features, and improvements are kind of the big ticket items in this roadmap. Do folks feel like, or I guess just speak now if you feel differently. But instead of having a super columnar roadmap, I think that organizing them into the big ticket items would be really helpful for clarity. And then moving these over and getting them put on the roadmap is really the last part here. I know we went pretty far over time. All right. Do folks have other feature requests or things that feel like we didn't get captured here? Great session, y'all. This was a lot of fun doing this in the community stream. Hopefully you all enjoyed it as well. I really appreciated the feedback and chiming in as we got this wrapped up. Obviously, this is not an all-inclusive list. I think inevitably with any roadmap, we have forgotten some things that we will add, and some of these things will not make it into quarter two. It's just the general idea of road mapping things, but in full optimism, I think that this is a really well, one, this is a solid amount of work, and two, I think this is something that's completely doable, at least to work through over the next couple of months. So it's the kind of stuff that we're going to be working on. I appreciate you all being here, especially on all the streams. I hope I got to all the comments. Thank you for putting those in the Zoom chat when y'all could. But I think that's all that I had. My action item after this is just to take this Excalidraw and turn it into kind of a little less Charlie Day brainstormy diagram. I'm just going to kind of form up the columns a little bit and put it up on the website. So I guess everybody feel free to look out for that. All right, folks. Well, we are way over time. And so again, I appreciate you staying on. I won't we'll be back next week, and we should have plenty of time to go back to our general community WebAssembly community wasmCloud ecosystem talk time. But for now, I think I'll go ahead and call it. So thanks everyone, and we will see you next week.